What would you do if a complete stranger showed up at your home, claimed authority over your land, and started making demands like they owned the place? I never thought I'd have to ask myself that question until the day Karen pulled into my driveway. Life in the countryside was supposed to be peaceful. That's why I bought this land, a sprawling, quiet stretch of property with nothing but open fields, a few scattered trees, and the kind of silence you can't find in the city. No honking cars, no crowded sidewalks, and most importantly, no annoying neighbors breathing down my neck. Just me, my golden retriever Max, and the kind of freedom I had always dreamed of. That Saturday morning started like any other. The sun was just beginning to warm the earth, and a fresh cup of coffee sat steaming on my porch railing while Max dozed at my feet. He stretched lazily, his golden fur catching the light, completely content with the world. I was just about to sit down and enjoy the morning when I heard it, the distinct sound of tires crunching against gravel, an engine humming a little too smoothly for an old country road. Visitors were rare out here. Unannounced visitors? Almost unheard of. I frowned, setting my coffee down and stepping to the edge of the porch just as a sleek silver SUV came to a sharp stop in my driveway. The driver's side door popped open, and out stepped a woman who looked like she had just walked out of a corporate boardroom, not the backroads of rural America. Immaculate white blazer, designer sunglasses, hair pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense bun. She took one look at my home, my land, and, most importantly, Max, and I could already tell she didn't approve. She adjusted her sunglasses and strode toward me with the kind of confidence only someone truly entitled could pull off. "You must be Mark," she said, her voice clipped and businesslike. "We need to talk about a serious issue." I crossed my arms. "And you are?" She didn't blink. "Karen." Of course she was. I had no idea what kind of issue she thought she had, but something told me it was about to become my problem. Karen stood there with the kind of smug certainty that only someone used to getting their way could pull off. She didn't fidget, didn't second-guess herself, just stood tall, arms crossed, acting like she was about to lay down the law. "Mark," she said, her tone carrying the weight of someone who believed she was in charge, "your dog is a violation of the neighborhood regulations. Large breeds are not allowed. You need to remove him immediately." I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my patience in check. "This isn't a neighborhood," I said evenly. "This is my private land. There's no HOA here. No rules against dogs. Max isn't going anywhere." Karen pursed her lips, clearly not expecting resistance. "That's where you're wrong. This land is part of an extended residential zone that falls under HOA jurisdiction. You may not be familiar with the guidelines, but I assure you, they apply to you." My stomach twisted. I had researched everything before buying this land. There was no HOA, no neighborhood board, no ridiculous rules about what I could and couldn't do on my property. But the way she spoke, with complete conviction, made me uneasy. Still, I wasn't about to let some self-appointed authority figure waltz onto my land and dictate how I lived. "If that's true," I said, folding my arms, "then I'll need to see some proof. A document, a contract, something official." Karen's expression barely flickered. "You'll receive the paperwork soon," she said, her voice smooth but laced with irritation. "For now, consider this a warning. If the dog isn't gone by the end of the week, you'll be fined." I laughed. Actually laughed. A fine? For my own dog? On my own property? "You'll regret this," Karen said, turning on her heel. "I'll be back." As I watched her SUV kick up a cloud of dust down my driveway, I felt a sense of unease settle in my gut. People like Karen didn't take no for an answer. I didn't have to wait long to find out what she had planned next. 2 days later, I woke up to find a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. "Violation notice, failure to comply" was printed in bold letters at the top. Beneath it, the the same nonsense about unauthorized pets, noise complaints, and neighborhood regulations. At the bottom, a fine, $500 for non-compliance, increasing daily until resolved. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or throw the damn thing in a fire. Instead, I decided to do something better. I called the sheriff. By the time Deputy Williams pulled into my driveway that afternoon, I had a stack of paperwork ready, proof of my property purchase, legal documents showing there was no HOA in my area, and even zoning maps. If Karen wanted to play legal games, I was prepared to throw the rulebook right back at her. Williams was an older man, built like he'd spent half his life wrangling stubborn bulls and the other half dealing with stubborn people. He stepped out of his cruiser with an air of exhaustion, like he already knew exactly what kind of nonsense he was about to deal with. "Afternoon, Mark," he greeted. "What's going on?" I handed him the notice. "Apparently, I'm being fined for having a dog." He read it over, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Karen?" "Bingo." Williams let out a slow sigh, shaking his head. "I swear, she's got nothing better to do." He looked up at me. "This isn't real. She can't fine you for anything. There's no HOA here. You own this land free and clear." "That's what I thought," I said. "But she seems to think otherwise." Williams glanced back at his cruiser, like he was debating whether or not it was even worth the hassle. "I'll pay her a visit. Let her know she's got no authority out here." I watched him drive off toward Karen's house, hoping that would be the end of it. That she'd get the message and back off. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat. Less than an hour later, I heard the sound of tires crunching against my driveway again. This time, it was Karen herself, stepping out of her SUV like she had something to prove. "You think calling the sheriff is going to scare me?" she snapped, marching toward my porch. I crossed my arms, staying calm. "I think calling the sheriff is going to remind you that you don't own this land." Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "You're making a huge mistake, Mark. If you don't comply, I'll take legal action. You won't like what happens next." She wasn't bluffing. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't over. The next morning, I stepped outside to find something that made my blood run cold. My fence, the one I had built myself, post by post, was spray-painted with bright red letters. "Dangerous dog. Remove immediately, ****. Max stood beside me, his ears perked in his stance alert, sensing the tension in my body. My hands clenched into fists as I took in the vandalism. This wasn't some random act of property damage. This was targeted. This was Karen. I checked the security footage immediately, my pulse hammering as I scrolled through the recordings from the night before. And there it was, 2:37 a.m., a shadow moving along my fence line, a figure holding a spray can, methodically defacing my property. The grainy image wasn't perfect, but I didn't need high resolution to know exactly who it was. Karen had crossed another line. I wasted no time calling Deputy Williams. By the time he arrived, I had already taken pictures of the damage, saved the footage, and printed everything I needed to file a formal complaint. Williams took one look at the spray-painted message and let out a long, tired sigh. "She just doesn't know when to quit, does she?" "Apparently not," I said, my voice tight with anger. He followed me inside as I pulled up the footage on my laptop, letting him watch the incriminating evidence for himself. He didn't even blink. "That's enough to press charges," he confirmed. "Trespassing. Vandalism. Harassment." I exhaled, my frustration easing just slightly. "Good. Let's do it." Williams nodded, pulling out his radio. "I'll go have a chat with her." But Karen, as expected, had no intention of backing down. Not even 20 minutes later, her silver SUV came screeching into my driveway, tires kicking up a cloud of dust. She stepped out, her face red with fury, waving a piece of paper in her hand. "You think you can do this to me?" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the quiet morning air. "You're the one breaking the law. You're the one causing problems." I stayed on my porch, arms crossed. "You vandalized my property, Karen. I've got the footage. There's no talking your way out of this." She stormed up the steps, shoving the paper toward me. "This is a legal notice," she spat. "A cease and desist order. You're harassing me, and if you don't stop, I'll take you to court for defamation." I almost laughed. "You spray-painted my fence. You trespassed on my land. And I'm the one harassing you? Don't play dumb, Mark," she snapped. "Your dog is dangerous. He's a menace to the community. I have every right to protect my neighborhood." I took a step closer, keeping my voice steady. "There is no neighborhood, Karen. There is no HOA. There is no community that you rule over. This is my land. You don't own it, and you don't control it." For a brief second, something flickered across her face, uncertainty, maybe even fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold determination. "You think you've won? You haven't seen anything yet." With that, she spun on her heel, climbed into her SUV, and sped off. I didn't have to wait long to find out what she meant. That night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., my security camera caught another unwanted visitor. But this time, it wasn't Karen. It was a man. Dressed in dark clothing, moving quickly, he crept along the side of my house, out of the camera's full view. A few seconds later, my motion lights flicked on, flooding the yard with light. He froze, glancing up at the camera, his face partially hidden by a hood. Then he took off, running toward the road and disappearing into the darkness. I rewound the footage, zooming in, analyzing every frame. Something was off. The way he moved, the hesitation, the way he glanced at the camera before running, it didn't seem like an actual burglar. It seemed staged. The next morning, my suspicions were confirmed when Karen showed up again, this time with 2 police officers in tow. "There was an attempted break-in on your property last night, correct?" one of the officers asked, looking at his notepad. I narrowed my eyes, glancing at Karen, who was standing smugly behind them. "How did you know about that?" She crossed her arms, smirking. "Oh, I just have a feeling this place is drawing the wrong kind of attention. I told you, your dog is dangerous. And now, look. Your property is a crime scene." I clenched my teeth. "Right. A break-in attempt that conveniently happened right after you threatened me?" Karen gasped, feigning outrage. "Are you accusing me of something, Mark?" I ignored her and turned back to the officers. "Yes, there was someone on my property last night. I've got security footage. But I don't think it was a real break-in attempt. I think it was staged." One officer frowned. "Staged?" I pulled out my phone, showing them the footage. "Look at the way he moves. The hesitation. The way he makes sure to step into the light. This wasn't a burglary, this was someone trying to make it look like my house was unsafe." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them sighed and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, did you have anything to do with this?" She scoffed. "Of course not. But you see, officers? This is what I was talking about. This whole place is unsafe. The dog, the lack of security, the—" "Karen, stop," I snapped. "You've been harassing me for weeks, and now this? You're out of control." The officer sighed. "Look, we can't prove anything yet, but given the situation, I'd recommend filing another report. If we find any connection between the break-in attempt and previous harassment, we'll proceed accordingly." I nodded, jaw tight. "I'll file it today." Karen's smirk wavered, but she still held her ground. "This isn't over," she muttered. I met her glare. "For once, Karen, I actually agree with you." The uneasy silence that followed Karen's failed attempt to frame my property as a crime scene didn't last long. Just as I began thinking she might finally back off, she made her boldest and most infuriating move yet, one that left me standing in my own yard, staring in absolute disbelief. It started when I noticed a small sign near the edge of my property. At first, I thought it was just another one of Karen's ridiculous notices. But as I walked closer, the bold red letters sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "For sale, prime real estate, contact for details." I blinked. Then I blinked again. Surely, this was a joke. But when I yanked the sign out of the ground, I noticed another one posted further down. And another near my fence line. Karen was trying to sell my land. Rage and confusion twisted in my chest as I pulled up my phone, dialing the number listed on the sign. A smug, familiar voice answered almost immediately. "Hello, this is Karen speaking. Are you calling about the property listing?" I clenched my teeth. "Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing?" A pause. Then a small, condescending laugh. "Oh, Mark. I see you finally noticed. Look, I know you've been struggling to keep up with neighborhood standards, so I took the liberty of finding a more suitable owner for your land. Someone who will take proper care of it." I gripped the phone tighter. "You don't own this property. You can't sell it." "Well," she said, feigning innocence, "that's not exactly true. I spoke with a real estate agent, and as the acting HOA representative, I have the authority to facilitate the sale of neglected or mismanaged properties within the community." "There is no HOA," I snapped. "That's up for debate," she replied smoothly. "And I already have interested buyers lined up. If I were you, I'd start packing." I hung up before I could say something I'd regret and immediately called my lawyer, Laura. When she heard what Karen had done, she let out a short, humorless laugh. "She's desperate. And she's committing fraud. Can we stop this before it goes any further?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said. "First, we'll send a cease and desist order. Then we'll file an official complaint with the real estate board. If she keeps pushing, we'll take her to court for attempted property fraud." It should have been simple. Karen had no actual claim to my land, and the law was on my side. But Karen, being Karen, wasn't just going to let it go. That night, I was woken up by Max's low growl again. When I checked the cameras, my stomach twisted at what I saw. Karen wasn't just trying to sell my land. She was destroying it. Two men, dressed in work clothes, were stomping through my yard, kicking over fence posts, and digging up patches of grass. One of them carried a sledgehammer, smashing apart my fire pit while the other started dragging my outdoor furniture toward the road. And standing off to the side, watching with satisfaction, was Karen. I grabbed my phone and dialed the sheriff's office without hesitation. "This is Mark. I have trespassers actively destroying my property. And I have it all on camera." Deputy Williams arrived within 20 minutes, and this time, he didn't come alone. Two additional officers pulled up behind him, their faces set in hard lines as they stepped out of their vehicles. I met them in the driveway, my hands shaking with fury as I pointed toward the damage. They tore up my fence. They smashed my fire pit. They threw my chairs onto the road, I seethed. And Karen brought them here. Karen, standing by her car with crossed arms, gave an exaggerated sigh. "Oh, calm down, Mark. This is just part of the process." The new buyers wanted a blank slate. One of the officers turned to her. "Ma'am, do you have any legal claim to this property?" "Well," she started, tilting her chin up. "As the HOA president." "You're not an HOA president," Williams cut in. "We already confirmed that. This land belongs to Mark. What you're doing is criminal trespassing and property destruction." Karen's smug expression faltered, but she recovered quickly. "No, you don't understand," she insisted. "I was trying to help." "You're under arrest," Williams said flatly. Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't do that." One of the officers pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Ma'am, step forward." She took a step back, looking at the men she had hired. "Do something." One of them threw his hands up. "Hey, lady, you told us this was all legal. We're not getting arrested for this." He turned to Williams. "She paid us in cash, told us the owner had agreed to clear the land." "Well, she lied," Williams said, gesturing toward them. "Pack up your tools and get off this property. Now." Karen, meanwhile, was still arguing, still ranting about how she was just doing what was best for the community even as the officers locked the handcuffs around her wrists. "You're making a mistake," she screeched as they led her to the squad car. "You'll regret this. I am the community." I let out a slow breath, watching as they shut the door behind her. The property was a mess, broken fence, ruined fire pit, torn up ground, but for the first time in weeks, I felt relief. Karen had finally gone too far. And now, she was going to pay for it. Karen's arrest wasn't just a victory, it was the moment everything started crumbling around her. News of her fraudulent HOA scam, the fake property sale, and the vandalism spread fast, and within days, her reputation in the community was beyond repair. The so-called buyers she had lined up for my land backed out immediately, unwilling to be associated with the legal mess she had created. The county office formally revoked the fraudulent HOA filing, and with the legal backing of my lawyer, every false claim she had made against me was wiped clean. The final blow came when the judge ordered Karen to pay damages for property destruction and legal harassment. The amount was steep, too steep for someone who had invested so much of her time and money trying to control what was never hers. With legal fees piling up and fines she couldn't afford, Karen had no choice but to sell her house. Seeing the "for sale" sign in front of her property was the sweetest kind of justice. She tried to hold her head high, pretending she wasn't utterly humiliated, but the sight of her packing up and leaving town for good was proof that she had lost everything she had fought so hard to control. The woman who once stood in my yard, smugly telling me I'd regret not listening to her, was now the one with nothing left. As for me, peace returned, slowly but surely. I rebuilt my fence, replaced my fire pit, and cleaned up the damage she had left behind. My land was mine again, untouchable and free from her influence. Even Mac seemed to sense the shift. He roamed with ease, tail wagging, no longer needing to stay on high alert. It took time for me to stop expecting another absurd notice taped to my door or another ridiculous attempt at intimidation, but eventually, the quiet became normal again. The people in town still talked about her, of course. Some were shocked by how far she had gone, while others, neighbors who had suffered under her self-imposed authority before, weren't surprised at all. Karen had been the kind of person who believed she was untouchable, that her rules and manipulations would always work in her favor. But in the end, she learned the hard way that some people won't be pushed around. Looking back, I realized that this wasn't just about standing up to Karen, it was about standing up to a mentality. The belief that people like her can control everything simply because they want to. She thought she could rewrite the rules, forge documents, and intimidate me into submission. But she was wrong. I fought back, and I won. Have you ever dealt with an HOA or a Karen who thought they had more power than they really did? What's the worst experience you've had with someone trying to control what wasn't theirs? Share your stories, I'd love to hear how you handled it.